The police officer froze the moment he saw the poster, because the missing boy staring back at him was sitting inside his car, alive. Officer Daniel Brooks had been driving his night patrol through Ashford County, Oregon, a quiet forest town where absolutely nothing unusual ever happened after midnight. Rain tapped softly against his windshield as the wipers swept back and forth. It was a monotonous rhythm on a monotonous night, until he saw him. A child walking alone along Highway 9, barefoot, no jacket, and what was truly unsettling, no fear. Daniel pulled over immediately, his patrol lights casting long, dancing shadows through the trees. He rolled down the window. "Hey, kid," he called gently, trying not to spook him. "Are you lost?" The boy stopped right in the beam of the headlights. He looked about 10 years old, with a pale face and clothes caked in mud. But what disturbed Daniel most wasn't his appearance. It was his expression. The boy wasn't crying. He wasn't scared. He looked relieved. "You finally stopped," the child said quietly. His voice barely a whisper above the sound of the rain. Daniel frowned, confused. "What's your name?" The boy hesitated for a long moment, as if trying to remember. "Evan." Daniel didn't press. The priority was getting him out of the cold. He opened the passenger door. "Come on, let's get you somewhere warm." The boy climbed inside without another word, bringing the damp smell of earth and rain into the car. As they drove, Daniel noticed something strange. Evan kept checking the rearview mirror. His eyes darted back to the dark, empty road behind them, like he was expecting someone to appear. He was jumpy, but not in the way a lost child should be. It was something else. 10 minutes later, Daniel pulled into a brightly lit roadside gas station. He needed to call child services, get this sorted out. "Stay here. I'll be right back," he told the boy. As he walked toward the entrance, something on the wall caught his attention. A bulletin board, weathered and peeling, covered in community flyers, and a row of missing posters. One photo made his stomach drop. It felt like the ground had fallen out from under him. Same face, same eyes, same boy, Evan Miller, missing for 3 years. 3 years. Daniel's breath hitched. He slowly turned his head back toward his patrol car. Evan sat exactly where he'd left him, a small silhouette in the passenger seat. Watching him, waiting. Daniel's hand trembled as he ripped the poster from the wall and walked back to the car. He opened the driver's side door, the poster crinkling in his grip. "Evan," he said, his voice strained. "Do you know how long you've been missing?" The boy just looked at him, his expression one of pure confusion. "I wasn't missing," he replied. So simply, so matter-of-factly, it was terrifying. Daniel's pulse quickened. His training hadn't prepared him for this. "Then where were you?" Evan leaned forward and whispered something so quietly Daniel almost missed it. "With them." Daniel turned instinctively, his eyes scanning the rain-swept darkness. The road was empty, pitch black. But then he saw it. Headlights. Far back in the distance, almost hidden by the curtain of rain. A black SUV, just sitting there, engine running, watching. Daniel didn't hesitate. He jumped into the driver's seat, his heart hammering against his ribs. "You know those people?" His eyes scanning the rain-swept darkness. The road was empty, pitch black. But then he saw it. Headlights. Far back in the distance, almost hidden by the curtain of rain. A black SUV, just sitting there, engine running, watching. Daniel didn't hesitate. He jumped into the driver's seat, his heart hammering against his ribs. You know those people? Evan nodded slowly, his eyes wide with the terror Daniel was now beginning to share. They're the reason no one finds us. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. No one finds us, plural. His training kicked in, pushing past the fear. This wasn't a lost child case anymore. This was a crime scene. He started the engine, and at that exact moment, the SUV's headlights flared to life, bright and piercing. It started moving, following. Rain intensified, becoming a torrential downpour as Daniel accelerated toward town. The vehicle stayed behind them, a dark predator in his rearview mirror. It never sped up, never fell back. It just stayed close enough to be a constant, menacing presence. Evan's breathing became shaky, each exhale a small, panicked puff of air. They always come back, he whispered. Daniel grabbed his radio, his hands slick with sweat. Dispatch, this is Officer Brooks. I may have located missing juvenile Evan Miller. The radio exploded with a deafening burst of static. The signal was gone. And then everything went haywire. Every electronic system in the car flickered at once. The dashboard lights blinked on and off erratically. The radio died completely. The GPS screen went black. Daniel looked into the mirror again. The SUV was closer now. Way too close. Then Evan said something that made Daniel's blood run cold. You shouldn't have stopped for me. Daniel swallowed hard, the fear a tight knot in his throat. Why? The boy turned his head and looked directly at him, his young eyes holding an ancient, chilling knowledge. Because now, they know where you live. As if on cue, the SUV suddenly accelerated, its engine roaring. Daniel slammed his foot on the gas pedal, the patrol car fishtailing on the slick asphalt. Rain blurred the road ahead as he fumbled for the siren controls, but they wouldn't activate. Dead. And then he saw it. Up ahead, the warm, welcoming lights of Ashford County blinked out. One by one, then all at once. A total power outage. The entire town was plunged into darkness. Complete, suffocating black. Evan grabbed Daniel's arm, his small hand surprisingly strong. They're taking the others tonight. Daniel's heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his ears. What others? The boy leaned in, his whisper lost in the storm. The missing ones. Behind them, the SUV's headlights vanished. Just gone. As if the vehicle had been swallowed by the night. As if it had never been there at all. But Daniel knew one thing now, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone. Finding Evan wasn't the end of a 3-year-old missing persons case. It was the beginning of something much, much bigger. The town lights of Ashford County vanished in an instant. Total darkness fell like a thick blanket, swallowing everything whole. The only light left was from Daniel's headlights, slicing through the heavy rain and reflecting off the slick, wet pavement. Officer Brooks, his partner, instinctively slowed the patrol car, a sense of caution settling over them. Beside him, Evan sat in the passenger seat, a statue of a boy, staring silently ahead into the void. The road was unnervingly empty, Not a single streetlight glowed. The familiar, colorful signs of the local stores were all dark, their cheerful greetings extinguished. Houses, once warm and inviting, were now just dark shapes melting into the shadows. A shiver ran down Daniel's spine. He glanced at the dashboard cisterns. Everything inside the patrol car was still working perfectly. Power, gauges, internal comms, all normal. But when he checked for outside communication, there was nothing. No signal, a dead zone. Just then, Evan broke the silence, his voice a barely audible whisper. "They're checking." Daniel's head snapped toward him. "Who's checking? Evan? Who?" But the boy wouldn't meet his gaze. He just kept staring forward, as if mesmerized by the endless stretch of dark highway. The wind howled, pushing sheets of rain across the wet asphalt. A feeling of deep unease settled in Daniel's gut. This wasn't just a power outage. Something else was happening. Abandoning their patrol route, Daniel turned the car toward the police station. It had to be the hub of activity right now. As they got closer, he could see the building, a dim silhouette against the stormy sky. Faint, flickering emergency lights pulsed from within, casting strange, dancing shadows. He parked hastily, his movements sharp and efficient, and guided Evan inside. The station was eerily quiet. The usual hum of activity, the ringing phones, the clatter of keyboards, the low murmur of conversation was all gone. Chairs were pushed back from desks, empty. Computer screens were frozen, displaying half-finished reports. Coffee cups, some still warm, sat abandoned. It was like everyone had simply vanished. Mid-task, "Hello?" Daniel called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. "Brooks, anyone?" Only silence answered. He rushed to the main dispatch console, trying the radio system. Static hissed back at him. He grabbed the landline phone. The line was dead. He checked his cell phone again. Still no service. They were completely cut off. While Daniel wrestled with the dead technology, Evan had wandered over to a large bulletin board on the far wall. It was plastered with missing person posters. Dozens of faces, young and old, stared out from the faded paper sheets. Daniel walked over, looking at the posters more closely. They weren't just from Ashford County. The dates spanned years, the names from towns all across the state. Evan stood transfixed, his eyes scanning the faces with an unnerving intensity. Then, Daniel saw it. A flicker of recognition. "You know them?" he asked, his voice low. Evan nodded slowly, his small hand lifting to point at several different photos. "I met them," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. Daniel felt a cold dread creep up his spine. How could this boy have met so many missing people from so many different places? Evan began to describe a place. A quiet place, he called it. Somewhere you go to wait. He described it as calm, controlled, orderly. His words painted a picture that wasn't frightening in itself, but the context made it terrifying. Nothing he said sounded overtly harmful, but nothing about it sounded normal either. It sounded sterile, like a holding area. As Daniel tried to process this, headlights swept across the station's front windows. A dark, unmarked SUV was moving slowly down the street. It didn't have police or government plates. It just cruised by, its occupants invisible behind the tinted glass. It didn't stop. It just kept going, disappearing back into the darkness. Evan instantly stepped back from the window, pulling himself into the shadows. "They look first," he whispered, a new layer of fear in his voice. That was it. Daniel made a decision. They were exposed, isolated, and something was hunting in the dark. They needed to get out, to find help, to break through whatever invisible net had been thrown over this town. He grabbed the emergency keys to a different patrol car, one with a full tank of gas. They had to assume their own car might now be tracked. Back outside, the heavy rain had softened into a fine, chilling mist. The highway felt even more abandoned than before, a ghost road stretching into the unknown. Daniel drove south, his eyes constantly scanning the mirrors, his hands tight on the wheel. Evan was quiet again, his attention fixed on the dark, skeletal trees flying past the window. The silence in the car was heavy, thick with unspoken questions and mounting fear. After what felt like an eternity, Evan spoke again, his voice soft. He talked about a time he was lost. He didn't say where or when, just that he was lost. And someone had found him. Someone who promised him safety, a place to wait until things were right again. He mentioned other children, and how some of them, after a while, had returned home, as if they were being borrowed and then sent back. Daniel listened to every word, his mind racing, trying to piece together an impossible puzzle. Borrowed children? A quiet place for waiting? The missing people? The power outage? The strange SUV? It was all connected, somehow, with this strange, quiet boy at the center of it all. Then, up ahead, a cluster of bright lights broke through the mist. A checkpoint. It was set up near the next highway exit. Daniel saw figures in official-looking uniforms, calmly guiding the few vehicles on the road. A wave of relief washed over him. Civilization. Authority. He slowed the patrol car, preparing to explain the situation in Ashford. An officer with a calm demeanor and a polite smile approached their window. But as he got closer, Evan seemed to sink lower in his seat, his body tense with nervousness. Something was wrong. Daniel's instincts screamed at him. He looked at the officer, then at the other officials. They were calm, too calm. Their efficiency felt practiced, almost robotic. He made a split-second choice. He gave the officer a nod, a simple, "Everything's fine, officer," and kept the car rolling forward, slowly at first, then picking up speed. He didn't stop. He drove right through the checkpoint, expecting flashing lights and sirens to erupt behind them. But there was nothing. He looked in the rearview mirror. The checkpoint just faded into the mist, its lights disappearing as if they were never there. And then, far behind them, a single pair of headlights appeared, following at a steady, silent distance. They were not alone on this road. Thanks for watching. If this story has you hooked, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. The highway stretched quietly ahead. Daniel kept driving, pushing the car through the thick, clinging mist that swallowed the road. In the passenger seat, Evan kept his eyes on the side mirror. Far behind them, a pair of distant headlights followed, a calm and steady presence in the gloom. They never got closer, but they never fell back either. Daniel's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that they were being monitored. The initial fear that had gripped him for hours was slowly hardening, transforming into a cold, hard determination. He wasn't sure what he was driving into, but he knew he couldn't turn back. As the first faint traces of dawn began to paint the horizon, the sign for Ashford County faded into the rearview mirror, disappearing into the mist behind them. Daniel finally pulled over near an old, forgotten roadside overlook. The engine ticked quietly as it cooled, the only sound in the vast silence. Majestic mountains, shrouded in the morning haze, surrounded the empty stretch of road. He rolled down the window, and the crisp, fresh morning air rushed in, clearing his head. Evan cautiously opened his door and stepped out, stretching his legs. Out from the confines of the car, he looked visibly relieved, taking a deep breath as if tasting freedom for the first time. The quiet was soon broken by the first calls of morning birds, a gentle, natural chorus that felt startlingly normal. For a moment, it was easy to pretend the terrifying night had been nothing but a bad dream. Daniel pulled out his phone, his heart pounding. 1 bar, then 2. The signal was back. A flood of messages and notifications immediately poured in, making the screen buzz relentlessly. He scrolled through them, his eyes scanning for answers. Emergency alerts about a massive, unexplained power failure across several counties. But nothing else. Not a single mention of missing children. No reports of mysterious road checkpoints. It was as if the entire night, the fear, the chase, had never happened. Daniel stared at the phone, completely bewildered. How could there be nothing? He looked over at Evan, who was now sitting quietly on a weathered wooden bench at the edge of the overlook. They reset things, Evan said softly, his voice barely a whisper on the morning breeze. Daniel turned, his confusion deepening. Who are they? Who are these people really? Evan looked down at his hands, thinking carefully before he spoke. They watch the kids who disappear, he said, his voice gaining a little more strength. The ones that nobody finds right away. Daniel stood frozen, listening intently as the boy continued. Evan described a place that sounded nothing like a prison. A quiet facility with clean rooms and calm, gentle voices. He talked about doctors who asked simple questions, not to interrogate, but to understand. He spoke of kind people who helped frightened children feel safe, who gave them a place to rest and recover. There were no locked doors, no sense of being trapped. There was only waiting. Waiting? Daniel asked, his voice tight. Waiting for what? Evan looked up, his eyes meeting Daniel's. For the families who are still searching, he said slowly, each word landing with incredible weight. Daniel felt a jolt, as if the world had just tilted on its axis. Evan explained further. Some children were never reported missing properly. Some cases went cold almost immediately, forgotten by overburdened systems. Those children, the ones who fell through the cracks, stayed at the facility longer. They were protected, cared for, until a safe, permanent placement could be found. In that instant, Daniel understood. This vast, silent organization wasn't a source of danger. It was a shield. It was a network of quiet recovery, operating completely outside the glare of public panic and media frenzies. The power outages, the roadblocks, they weren't meant to trap people. They were meant to prevent widespread attention to allow these delicate transfers to happen unnoticed. Once the children were secure, the systems were restored, and the communities were never even aware of the potential chaos they had been spared. Evan turned his face toward the rising sun, a soft glow illuminating his features. "They said I could go home soon," he whispered, a tremor of hope in his voice. Just then, a gentle, rhythmic sound drifted up the mountain road. The sound of police sirens, but not the frantic, urgent kind. These were calm, measured, a pair of official state vehicles, clearly marked and unmistakably real, pulled into the overlook. Real authorities, their uniforms crisp in the morning light, stepped out with a calm professionalism. There was no tension, no drawn weapons. A woman in a plain suit, a social worker, separated from the group and walked directly toward them. She smiled warmly, her eyes fixed on the small boy. "Evan," she said gently. The moment was filled not with urgency, but with an overwhelming sense of relief. Daniel instinctively took a step back, giving them space. He watched as the social worker knelt down, speaking softly to Evan while an officer confirmed the details over his radio. The paperwork was already in place. Evan Miller, officially reported missing 18 months ago. His case had been reopened overnight, fast-tracked by new information. His family, who had never given up hope, was already on a plane. Evan's face crumpled, overwhelmed with a wave of joy and disbelief so powerful it was breathtaking. He turned and threw his arms around Daniel, hugging him with a strength that belied his small frame. "You stopped," Evan cried into his shoulder. "You stopped for me." Daniel hugged him back, a lump forming in his throat. "Someone had to," he managed to say. As the morning sunlight finally broke over the mountaintops, bathing the entire scene in a brilliant, golden light, Daniel noticed something else. Far down the road, the pair of headlights that had followed them all night slowly, finally, turned away. Their job was done. And somewhere out there, in the quiet light of a new day, other lost children were finding their way home too. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. We'll see you in the next one.